Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to talk about some interesting developments in regards to Star Wars. Now, um, I haven't seen the other episodes of The Mandalorian yet, but I have seen the first one. I did enjoy it. We did a breakdown of it on the Unweaponized Nerd Rage's channel. But the thing is that this has kind of given me a little bit of hope moving forward, and this is some interesting developments that we've seen now. And here's the thing. Jon Favreau has been kind of a part of Marvel and Disney for a very long time. Obviously, he had a hand in the Iron Man films well before Disney acquired Marvel Studios, and he's continued to play Happy Hogan both in the Iron Man 3 and all of the MCU-related films all the way up to Spider-Man Far From Home. So he's familiar with that, and then also he is the writer and showrunner for The Mandalorian. And so now that he's kind of cemented himself in to an extent with this new show, again, assuming the rest of the season goes as good as the first few episodes have, it's being speculated now that he is going to be kept around for the long run. What I mean by that is this. Kathleen Kennedy, I believe it was last year, she was given a 3-year extension on her position because they couldn't find anybody to replace her due to the toxic nature of the environment she has created at Lucasfilm. Now, I have speculated in the past that Disney is attempting to kind of clean house behind the scenes, which is a large reason why I think Dave Filoni has had more of a hand in certain things going forward, as well as Jon Favreau. And what it's looking like now, and what people are speculating, is that Favreau is going to be kept around in an extended role after The Mandalorian has aired, and he's going to be in charge of more projects going forward in an attempt to replace Kathleen Kennedy when her contract is up in 2021. Now, I would be all for this, or I am all for this, I should say, because I think Favreau knows film, he knows Star Wars, he knows how to do good science fiction and good storytelling. We've seen that from him before. He has had a few off moments in the past. We know about stuff like Cowboys and Aliens and shit like that, but for the most part, he's fairly spot on with the way that he's able to portray and tell stories, and I am, for one, am actually very excited for that. And if The Mandalorian I assume it will at this point, but if The Mandalorian gets a season 2, and we start seeing more and more stuff that Favreau is involved with. And I think that after 2021, because again, the next Star Wars movie that is due to be released is in 2022. And there's also speculation going around that Favreau could also be directing that film, as they have announced today that a director is attached. However, they have not revealed the name of said director. And that will be the next Star Wars film that will hit theaters. So we still have about 3 years, a little less than 3 years. Actually, no, a little more, because I think they're going to go with the Christmas route again with that one. But a little over 3 years until that film comes out. Probably another year or so before we even know anything about it from a story standpoint. But again, we don't know who this director is, but there is, again, a large speculation that it is Favreau. And again, I don't have a problem with that. I think getting him involved is good because I think that he knows what he's doing, as opposed to Kathleen Kennedy, who I don't think knows what she's doing. And there's been also some other things that have come out today regarding Kathleen Kennedy that kind of highlight a problem that I think Lucasfilm has been having over the years since the Disney acquisition. And there's a specific thing that I would like to touch on, and that's Kathleen Kennedy issued a response today when asked the question about why have they had so many production problems in terms of keeping directors attached to projects regarding the Star Wars films, because we all know that there has been a horrible production record regarding these films over the years. We all know the stuff that happened with Solo. We know the stuff that happened with Last Jedi with Colin Trevorrow. We know the Rogue One stuff. So there's been a lot of kind of clashes between directors and the Lucasfilm brass over the years. But this is kind of an interesting take in the sense that I feel like this is somebody who's operating from a very narrow-minded point of view. But let's go over this. I'm going to read this is a bit of a long statement, so bear with me, but I'm going to read the entire statement to you, word for word. And this is Kathleen Kennedy explaining why they've had these production problems. So, every one of these movies is a particularly hard nut to crack. There's no source material. We don't have comic books. We don't have 800-page novels. We don't have anything other than passionate storytellers who get together and talk about what the next iteration might be. We go through a really normal development process that everybody else does. You start by talking to filmmakers who you think exhibit the sensibilities that you're looking for, and I would argue that the list is very small. People who really do have the sensibilities about these kind of movies, and then the experience and the ability to handle how enormous a job these movies are. So we try to be as thoughtful as we possibly can about making those choices. I would also argue that sometimes people get involved in the normal development process and then they realize, oh my God, this is so much more than I ever imagined. So it's pretty common that when you're working on movies, you're not making choices and decisions that necessarily work out exactly the way you wanted from the get-go. End quote. Now, I can point out several things in that are complete BS. First of all, the first part of it, we don't have comic books, we don't have 800-page novels, we don't have anything other than the passionate storytellers who get together and talk about the next iteration might be. That is total bullshit. You have the EU. Even though Disney has renounced the EU, unless there is a directive coming down from Bob Iger, you can pick and choose from the EU, and we've seen that. Dave Filoni has done that with Rebels and some of the other projects, and we're probably going to see more of that stuff with The Mandalorian as well. You know, stuff kind of picked out and chosen from the EU, and actually we did see that in the first episode. Weaponized Nerd Raids pointed out some of the Old Republic stuff to me that I didn't really notice at the start. But you have the material there. You have all of it sitting in front of you that you can cherry pick from if you so choose. Again, because Disney has made it not canon at this point. So you can pick and choose that stuff and then put it in and plug it in where you want. So I find that sentiment very, very odd coming from her, especially somebody who's been so familiar with the company for so many years. But then moving on from that is the argument that you have a lot of directors that can't handle the size and scope of a Star Wars film, and they're not able, that they don't have the proper sensibilities. Now, sensibilities I would question to an extent, because I don't think it's necessarily sensibilities. I think it's creative vision is what you should be looking for. Maybe that's just her word for it. But the idea is that based on what I think she's going by, and again, this is my definition of what she means by sensibilities, is she wants people that are going to toe the company line. She wants people like a J.J. Abrams who's just going to do whatever he's told and make the movie that they want made. That's the kind of person they want, which I think does stifle the creative process quite a bit. And then you also have people, going forward like Rian Johnson, who basically just does it as a massive troll job to people. But the bottom part that I found interesting, which is the direct quote from her, is, oh my God, this is so much more than I ever imagined. Look, if you're hiring on directors who are not used to having a $200 million budget, again, like a Rian Johnson, or, like a, Gareth Edwards had some experience before that, but, Lord Miller, I don't think had ever worked with anything that was even close to the budget that Solo was. But when you hire on people to do projects that aren't used to doing big projects, like she just said above, then I think you run into the problem there of people that get in over their head very, very quickly because they're not sure about the size and the scope of what they're actually doing. And the fact that you hired people that would think that way, or that would not be able to handle that type of a thing, is interesting. And when you look at the directors they have hired, really there's only a couple examples. Obviously Rian Johnson, but Colin Trevorrow had just come off Jurassic World, which was a huge hit, so he knew how to handle a big budget. Even though I have some problems with that movie, he does know how to handle the large set pieces. J.J. Abrams, obviously, they've hired him multiple times now. He knows how to handle big set pieces. Gareth Edwards was coming off Godzilla. He knew somewhat how to handle big set pieces. So I disagree with the argument that she states that there's not enough people in the industry, that there's a very small pool of directors to choose from. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case at all. I think the case is that they don't want to pay directors, because there are many, many, many directors that probably would have loved to have come in and done a Star Wars movie, but they are senior directors. In fact, if I remember correctly, there was an interview with Ridley Scott a number of years ago, and he was asked if he would ever agree to do, I think it was a Marvel movie, I don't think it was Star Wars, but if he would ever agree to do a Marvel film. And Scott said he would, but the problem is that they don't want people like him. They want young, impressionable people that they can basically kind of push around and control. They don't want veterans like him, and he also added the fact they would not want to pay his price tag. But the idea is that he would do things his way, and he would not toe the company line. He would make a movie that he believed was good, and then on the other side of that, also that they didn't want to pay him the money that he was going to ask for. So I think that's another big problem in this, in the way that she's conducted herself as well. Now, you can also point to the fact, okay, J.J. Abrams has a long track record, but again, he was somebody that was going to toe the company line no matter what, and they knew that. And then you also look at Jon Favreau now, who The Mandalorian is a large departure from what we've been seeing with Disney Star Wars, especially lately. It's a lot darker of a story. The tone, the visuals are very different than what we're used to currently. It's those very bright visuals. This is mostly very dark and kind of shadowy type of visuals. He's not doing what you would consider a prototypical Star Wars story that you would put to screen. So even though he is an accomplished director, I wouldn't necessarily put him in that camp. And also, if they are grooming him to take the eventual leadership position, they are willing to spend the money on him. But that's the interesting thing here, is that you see that you have a ton of directors that are out there which would probably be willing to direct a Star Wars film, but they won't go to them. And I think Scott has a point there where they won't go to them because they're not going to toe the company line and because they can't afford the price tag. But the statement itself, I think, just shows the level of dysfunction at the highest levels of Lucasfilm, and I think that it does not paint Kathleen Kennedy in a necessarily very good light, where she is just kind of ignoring the fact that they have all these story elements available to them from the old EU, and they're just ignoring them for whatever reason. Again, I don't know if there's something that's coming down from the top in terms of Bob Iger or any of the higher brass at Disney saying that you can't use these things, but obviously Dave Filoni and others have snuck them into Star Wars media, so I don't think they're necessarily off limits. But that's just kind of an interesting tidbit today on some Star Wars news. I'm not going to harp on this stuff too much. This was just kind of an influx of a lot of little things that came out at the same time, so I just wanted to kind of relay that information and give my thoughts on it. But I want to know what you think. Do you like the idea of Jon Favreau taking over at Lucasfilm, and do you think it could possibly, salvage the Star Wars franchise over time? Put your thoughts in the comments below. Again, I'd like to know what you're thinking. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?